John Guillebaud is one of our patrons now, but was once a chairman at a critical time in the development of our organisation. And he's an advisor to DFID, among other things, and a great expert on reproductive health worldwide. So, John, over to you.
Thank you very much, Roger. And thank you very much, Srila, for a wonderful talk. And I can link so much back with what you've said, because a subtext of my whole presentation is remove the barriers to women of all kinds, the kinds that you're referring to, but specifically the barriers to reproductive health and the methods of family planning. It isn't just the availability of the methods, it's the actual barriers that often are produced by men, and I'm almost as anti-men as you are, actually, in some respect, even though I'm a man myself. And I have to say, it was fascinating to hear you just come back from Rwanda, because I was born in Burundi and brought up in Rwanda and at school in Uganda. And I've got a lovely story which really ties in with what you were saying, Sheila. A doctor came to me, a missionary doctor from Rwanda, and told this story. He said a patient came to him, a Rwandese man, with a bad back. And so the doctor, just as part of getting the history, said, "How did you get your bad back?" And he said, "Well, this bloke and I were lifting up this enormous pile of sticks to put on my wife's back." And you could use that story, couldn't you? I mean, isn't that incredible? But empowering women is certainly an important subtext of my talk. My main title is Sex and the Planet. And I have an amplified title, which we'll come to shortly. But let's start with the word sex, because sometimes when we're in the business of population and family planning, I think we forget that sex is such a crucial part of everybody's life. The average young chap thinks about sex every 90 seconds. Day, every time he's awake, every 90 seconds on average, we're thinking about sex. That's how it is. And it goes on. Here's this lovely couple interviewed on their 50th wedding anniversary. And the local journalist asked Henry, "How is it you think you managed to keep so sprightly?" And he responded, "Sex, nearly every day. Nearly on Monday, nearly on Tuesday, nearly on Wednesday." A bit more about sex. This comes from a calendar of my daughter's bedroom wall. How to please a woman. Read that for yourselves. I hope you agree with most of this, the women anyway, especially missing the football for her, remembering anniversaries, being really interested in what she has to say. How do you please a man? You'll have to stand up to read the bottom. Do you agree with that? Show up naked, bring beer. Sex. Sex is capable of being the greatest pleasure that a couple who love each other can possibly enjoy and give to each other. So don't think I'm against it. But it is also the most dangerous human activity for humans themselves and ultimately for all life on Earth. That's where it all comes from. There are direct dangers of sex. Heart attacks and strokes. Doing it. Mostly men. Sexually transmitted infections. Both genders. The other risks of sex are unfairly mainly for women. First of all, maternal mortality, which Srila Flaza referred to. It's now got a bit better, but it's 1,000 women a day dying needlessly just because they're having a baby. Whereas in rich countries, it's almost unheard of to die in pregnancy or labor. It's a really rare event, which shows how avoidable it actually is. But actually morbidity, and again, Sheila mentioned this horrible business of fistulae and the smelly, smelly fistulae that women get, is 20 times more common than mortality. And folks, at least a third, some would say nearly a half of all the pregnancies are happening to women who actually didn't want the pregnancy that kills them or gives them a smelly fistula. And folks, you can't die of a pregnancy you don't have. It's a pretty basic thing. And the best way to prevent all this misery for so many women is family planning. And even infant mortality is improved by family planning. People forget that. One organization among all the development groups that has finally really come out about the importance of family planning and population issues is Save the Children. And they produced this booklet for the symposium this summer, this summit on family planning on Population Day on July the 11th that I was a bit involved in organizing, that was referred to by Roger. Every woman's rights. And the bottom corner it says here, no child born to die. What a wonderful slogan. No child born to die. The way that Baroness Flather finished her talk was just along those lines. Much better not to be born than to born to die in that way. And I love that. We men would have to agree, certainly about our own women, every woman's right. And if you don't actually accept that every woman's right when she says she is, you're going to be in trouble. So it's a lovely, there's a lovely double, there's a lovely double meaning at the top of that, isn't there? They're right, yeah. So, direct dangers, which we saw before. And they're all reducible by this simple technology of family planning. What a fantastic win-win situation. We're concerned about what I call the indirect dangers, but the direct dangers are so much in there, and it's so much a win-win situation. It's unbelievable that there should be so much opposition to what we in this room stand for. I was saying to somebody over lunch, it's so obvious to us, as plain as the end of our noses, what we stand for in population matters. And yet somehow it's a great taboo and people can't seem to grasp it. So what are the indirect dangers of sex? And what I mean here is uncontracepted sex. There are no dangers, or almost no dangers, as regards the planet from contracepted sex, because we don't have more children, or need not have, through contraception, more children than either the planet can afford or we in individual families can afford. But the indirect dangers of uncontracepted sex are manifest. We haven't quite reached this situation yet of standing room only, but we could be almost on the way there. 7,000 million last October, an extra 83 million or so a year ever since then. If you look at this little presentation, you'll see a longer version of this in a moment. If you look at this little presentation here, if I tell you that that the population of Germany and the population of Egypt are each around 83 million, where, as we get towards the end of this little presentation, where can we fit a country the size of Germany or of Egypt? Every year. And if you look at it on a weekly basis, every week a greenhouse gas producing city for 1.5 million people is built somewhere every week. Think of it. Since last Saturday, 1.5 million. Another Saturday from now, 1.5 million people. When you think what a city does, the footprint of a city, that it needs for itself and a further land area around it for the crops to feed it, the rainforests that we burn to the rate we're burning forests at the rate of a football pitch every 4 seconds. We're still doing that. And that's being done in order to feed these countries. And of course, the greenhouse gas is produced by a city. Even if it's a poor city, it requires energy. All this you know, and a lot of what I'm saying, just this introductory part of my talk, is helpful perhaps to you as you advocate for this issue for other people. And I'm happy to let you see or have my slides, in fact. But we're hearing a lot about footprints. Here's the footprint that we're all in this room, I'm sure, trying to reduce, and outside it. But you don't hear enough about the number of feet. It's footprints and it's the number of feet. And it's that half of this story that, of course, we in this organization are trying to emphasize. Because the good news, every year more people reduce their carbon footprints. Bad news, every year more people. Again, it's not rocket science. It's so blooming obvious that you have to address both those issues. And again, it's also very obvious, and I certainly don't need to do this with such an informed audience, but it's ever so easy to show that population is the great driver of all these major 21st century challenges. That's a slide of Roger's, in fact. And it's just so true. And all the MDGs are reducible only if we do address family planning. These are the Millennium Development Goals, and the All-Party Parliamentary Group, which Baroness Flather is linked with, produced a very good document which stated basically that you will never succeed with the Millennium Development Goals unless you addressed family planning as part of the deal. Well, if you just think of education, which again she's mentioned, if there are 80 million extra people per year, that means with class sizes of 40, you need 2 million extra teachers every year in the world just to teach the new arrivals. And we're not doing a very good job about teaching those we've already got. And you can do exactly that with all these different issues. They're all affected so strongly by the absence of contracepted sex. And you know well, our great patron, Sir David Attenborough, who has said this: I have not seen a world problem that wouldn't be easier to solve with fewer people, or harder and ultimately impossible with ever more. Now, in my title I said also, uncontracepted sex by humans is the greatest threat to all life on Earth. And that may seem an amazingly comprehensive statement, but it's true. We are the biggest threat. There have been 5 great extinctions on the planet, but they were all caused by big geological events or being hit by missiles from space and so on. Meteorites, huge ones. This is the first time that one species has endangered every other species on the planet by its sheer overgrowth in numbers. And I heard again from Mathis McAnagle some years ago from the Global Footprint Network that wild species are now only 3% of vertebrate flesh on the planet. Isn't that a tragedy that that should be the case? 97% of vertebrate flesh on the planet is human flesh, or our cows, our sheep, our pigs, and our dogs. Put that all together, you're left with just 3%. Whereas 10,000 years ago, it would have been about 0.1% human flesh, and the rest all wild. How could anybody think we could carry on sustainably in that way? And yet outside this room, lots of people do. They continue to behave as though we had an infinite world which we can treat as an inexhaustible milch cow for our resources, an inexhaustible cesspit for all our wastes. Ain't possible. Ain't possible.